Lee is a still dangerous storm pushing across portions of the Atlantic waters, and it will be a very close call for portions of the New England states, as well as into portions of Nova Scotia. Front timing coming off of the northeast is still key as this system pushes on off towards the north, and I'm also tracking the potential for some long-term trouble getting going in the tropics with the GFS model showing a dangerous storm heading towards the southeast coast. I've got all the information on that coming up in this video. Alright, thank you so much for joining me here. Here's a look at Hurricane Lee. As of the 11 a.m. Sunday advisory, it had 110 mile per hour wind. We're getting close to that 5 p.m. advisory as I film this, and I wouldn't be shocked if this gets back up to Category 3 strength, because that is expected. We're beginning to see an eye reform in the system, and it's expected to make that northward curve as we go into your Tuesday night and into your Wednesday. Remaining a major hurricane until that curve with the National Hurricane Center. Yes, they will come out with a brand new cone this evening, but nonetheless, probably a Category 2 hurricane heading on off towards the north after that curve. Now, the key messages for Hurricane Lee include the fact that the core is expected to pass well north of the northern Leeward Islands, the Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico during the next couple of days. Dangerous surf and life-threatening rip currents are going to affect these islands as well as head towards the U.S., but it remains too soon to know what level of impacts, if any, Lee might have along the U.S. East Coast, Atlantic Canada, or Bermuda late next week, especially since the hurricane is expected to slow down considerably over the southwestern Atlantic. Regardless, dangerous surf and rip currents are expected along most of the U.S. East Coast. The track of the storm still remains uncertain this week. You could see the track line of the storm expected really by the GEFS model, so these are some ensemble members pushing this right on up towards the between really Nova Scotia and Maine, but you could see really what the overall cone on these models looks like. Really far eastern Nova Scotia is the far outskirts of the models, and far western Maine would be the furthest west that this would go, with the most likely scenario cutting it right in between. This storm could push Lee away, and the timing is key. You could see it pushing into the Great Lakes region. I talked about it in my last video. It is expected to make Lee at least slow down a little bit and affect the path, but by the time it actually makes it to Lee, it's going to pull it in, bring it on off towards the north, and really the timing for this is going to be as we head towards the 15th and into our 16th. We just really don't know exactly where this is going to go. I want to talk about a few other things with this front as well, because it's set to bring heat relief to portions of the central and eastern parts of the country for us here. It will briefly bring it into the upper Midwest, but especially it will feel quite nice into portions of the Great Lakes. Yes, this is going to push on down into the south central and towards Texas, as well as portions of the East Coast getting in on very comfortable conditions, with temperatures over the course of a 5-day span expected to be around 5 to 10 degrees below average. So here's that front setting up this weekend, actually expected to bring some severe weather for your Sunday night as I'm filming this. Yes, this will move into portions of the south central region, as well as into maybe some of the spots in the Midwest. We could see some severe weather with these storms that develop as well. As this pushes on off towards the south and east, we're going to see this cold front really begin to transpire as we go into our Monday, and you can see some of the rain and storms that are going to be along that. And also notice this is something we have not been able to break all summer. The ridge that's been over Texas is finally broken, and we get some showers and thunderstorms into that region as well. Much needed rain, in fact almost too much rain. I'll give you a look at that in a little bit, but you can see it's looking like we're going to get plenty of rain in the Four Corners. The south, we're going to have this go up the east coast, so really most of the eastern 2/3 of the country is going to be impacted by the storm and feel some positive relief. So all in all, this storm is positive for many reasons, especially if it helps Lee stay out to sea. As you can see, Lee right there in the southeastern corner of your screen, or the bottom right as you may call it, and as you can see, that cooler air just really filling in. That's why we don't have any precipitation. Cool dry air spilling on in from the Great Lakes as well as Canada region and heading on down into the southeast. It's going to feel quite refreshing. In fact, let's get into talking about those temperatures right about now. Alright, so here's a look at your expected lows for Tuesday morning. I outlined the cold front for you, but you can see it pretty clearly on the map with some 40s and 50s coming on down into portions of the Dakotas, Minnesota, the upper Midwest. This will also move into portions of Nebraska, with the East Coast as well as the Southeast still seeing plenty of 60s and 70s running in your overnight time frame. So not necessarily the most comfortable thing, especially in that direction. And then in terms of your afternoon highs, as we go into your Tuesday, we're going to see these temperatures still in the 80s to near 90 in a portion of the southeast, but look at how many comfortable 60s and 70s we're going to have coming on out of the Mountain West even and pushing into the Great Lakes. In fact, we'll have some 60s for highs there, the upper peninsula of Michigan seeing some 50s. This is going to be really nice weather for us. The only spot really still staying on the very warm side and seasonably warm side is where we're seeing this into portions of the southwest. Speaking of some of the regions for us here, the North Central is going to feel the nicest with this cool down. In fact, you might want to break out maybe a light jacket for us. I know in the North Central this is nothing compared to what you get in the winter, but nonetheless, this is going to feel quite chilly for us with the temperatures near 50 dropping down into the Chicago region. We're going to have plenty of 40s getting going into portions of, say, La Crosse, Wisconsin. We'll even see a few 30s try to sink on down into the upper peninsula of Michigan. Not necessarily our first freeze of the year, but one or two spots in the highest of elevations could see some mid to upper 30s for sure. Comfy dew points are going to be spreading south with this system. You can see how 50s and 60s, a few 40s as well getting going in the dew point department, but look how this just clears all the way down to the Carolinas. You can see really, unless you're in Texas and along the Gulf Coast, pretty much the entire eastern half of the country feeling the relief from this storm, and this is why I'm really calling this the first official fall front of the year. And another thing that's beneficial about it, it's that drought-stricken Texas will get very hefty rain totals. In fact, potentially the heaviest rain totals out of this storm. Look at these numbers. We've got a potential for 1 to 3 inches of rain in many areas for portions of eastern Colorado, eastern New Mexico, the Four Corners region, but especially over into portions of Oklahoma City, far northern Texas, around the, say, portions of Lubbock. These regions, we're looking at the potential for, several inches of rain out of the system. Dry, cool air will fill in from the north, and then the heat will continue in the Pacific Northwest. Of course, with that moisture getting going and continuing into portions of especially western Texas during the 6 to 10 day outlook, I would watch out for some flooding to really start to transpire in this region. But look at how overall we're going to have drier air filtering in, especially into the north, as well as sinking down into the southeast. Of course, it's expected to be a little wetter there in the northeast. Because of this, the models are predicting Hurricane Lee will make a very close call, enough to especially bring Maine as well as the Cape Cod region at least some rain and some gusty winds. Now, here are the exact model predictions for Hurricane Lee. You can see the GFS bringing this into portions of eastern Maine, the Canadian model dragging this over into portions of Nova Scotia, and that is also what the European model is doing. So right now, I think the forecast track line is for this to kind of go right in the middle of those models that I just showed you. Lee will likely interact with the front Friday just before the impact chance, and really you can't see the front much on here. This is the Canadian model, and I just wanted to show this to you. This is more of a radar model, and right now another thing that's interesting is that some of the models are showing a lot of the heavier rain being on the northwest side of the system, which would definitely drag those impacts in a stronger fashion into the northeast. But a lot of the models are also showing this on the northeastern side, which is more common. If it were to be on that northwestern side, the U.S. would see a lot more impacts, especially in the rain department out of this system. But one thing that we're definitely going to be seeing is the large swells coming, along with the chance for dangerous rip currents. Again, this front is really going to be a little bit ahead of schedule in terms of its timing, but it's going to be a little weaker than expected as well in terms of especially the strength and the energy with it. It's going to be falling apart as it goes out over the waters, which is why Lee might try to break through this, and the large swells could be quite dangerous regardless. You could see 10 to 20-foot waves crashing along portions of the Outer Banks. We'll see this go up into portions of Atlantic City, New Jersey, as well as up the East Coast. But look at this, places like Nova Scotia. This is a scary looking graphic for you here from the European model. Normally a very conservative model in the weather department, and we're looking at the potential for some waves 20 to 30 feet coming into portions of the southern coast of Nova Scotia, and the waves won't stop there. They'll continue progressing on up towards the north and east, so we'll be watching this Prince Edward Island for you, as well as towards Newfoundland as the system pushes on off towards the northeast and begins riding the jet stream, falling in line behind that cold front. Now, the cone for Tropical Storm Margot looks like this. You can see pretty much moving straight north. This is a system out over the central tropical Atlantic, and it's expected to continue that north with a slightly northwestern track to it, and really turning into a hurricane over the course of the next few days. Now, this system is not really a threat to the U.S. for sure. It might be a threat to the Azores here, which are those islands there on the northeastern side of the map, and they, of course, belong to Portugal for us, so we'll watch those areas for the potential of impacts down the road. So this is the last thing I want to show you, and I want to play this out. So again, you could see Lee and Margot on your screen, but what I want to show you is this secondary area, or should I say the third area transpiring on your screen. It's got a 40% chance of development there in the main development region of the Atlantic. Again, there are 2 hurricanes, but here comes the potential for a new tropical storm that the GFS is especially picking up on. The European model now at least indicating a storm will be there, so the chances are increasing that this is there. But look at how the GFS brings us straight towards land, and I want to back this up a little bit so you can see exactly what's going on. Look at how this has the potential potential to head towards the southeast. This could go into the Caribbean. There's a lot of things that we need to break down with the GFS model, but what I could definitely tell you is that the chances of it going in the Caribbean are the lowest, but the chances of it hitting the East Coast remain up in the air. Remember, we're talking even further out than Lee's impacts. So this is just not something I want to stress anybody out about, but this is something that will be there. The GFS expecting the system to ride just north of the Caribbean, kind of following an initial path similar to Lee, with the European model having this already beginning that northwestern track, and at the most hitting the northeast down the line. But again, this is, you're talking 2 weeks out with this storm. Thank you so much for watching this video. Here are the credits, and I appreciate you watching. Go ahead and drop a like as well as subscribe, and you can leave a comment below as well if you're interested in that.